Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to episode 8 of Voice Over Histories. I'm Katie Aiken, and this is the docuseries that shines a light on the people, the projects, and the stories from the voiceover industry of times past. In today's episode, we're delving into the history of a particular niche of voiceover translation. You've no doubt heard of subtitling and dubbing, but do you know about the Soviet voiceover? The issue of translating foreign TV and film for audiences in other countries is commonly dealt with by subtitling or dubbing. Despite the ongoing debate over which is better, they both solve the problem of language barriers, hence allowing entertainment to be understood and enjoyed by a wider audience. The Soviet voiceover also provides a resolution to this issue, though it has a slightly different take on how to solve it. So before we get into the details of Cold War politics, the kitchen debate, and Netflix backlashes, let's do a quick overview of exactly what the Soviet voiceover is. In a nutshell, the Soviet voiceover is a single male voice translating what the actors in a TV show or film are saying, in a completely neutral tone. The translator will voice every character in the film or show without any discernible differentiation, inflection, or emotion. The voiceover translation will play over the top of the original, which will still be audible but at a slightly lower volume, meaning that both the actors in the original language and the translated version can be heard at the same time. Here's an example for you.
Беднягам, которым никто больше помочь не может. Да. В прошлом у меня был плохой характер. Меня не зря назвали ведьмой. Но теперь я стала хорошей. Я исправилась. И я умею колдовать. Это мой талант. И не смейся. Я использую свой талант, чтобы помогать всем.
It seems generally agreed that this voiceover translation practice originated in Russia, springing up during the Cold War era in the late 1950s. These days, you're more likely to see it referred to as Gavrilov Translation when referring to Russian translations, named after Andrey Gavrilov, one of the OG voiceover translators. In the summer of 1959, the United States and the Soviet Union organized state-sponsored exhibitions to be held in each other's countries, the idea being an open cultural exchange. The Soviet Union were the first to open their exhibition in New York in the June of '59. Their focus was on technological achievements such as their satellite Sputnik, farming equipment, and artistic achievements in music and theatre. Conversely, the United States opened their exhibition in Moscow the following month and centered their focus around consumer goods that improved the lives of the average American. This included displays of fashion, processed food, Polaroid cameras, modern kitchen appliances, and color television. It was at the US Exhibition in Moscow that the infamous kitchen debate took place, so named because it occurred in a model American kitchen that was on display. The Soviet Premier, Khrushchev, and American Vice President Nixon had a series of lively exchanges, essentially debating the relative merits of their respective societies, communism versus capitalism. At one point, Khrushchev commented, "Many things you've shown us are interesting, but they're not needed in life. They have no useful purpose. They are merely gadgets." Amongst these gadgets was the Ampex VRX 1000, the first ever commercial videotape recorder. The kitchen debate went on for about 45 minutes, of which about 15 minutes were recorded.
This, Mr. Khrushchev, is one of the most advanced developments in communication that we have, at least in our country. It is color television, of course. It is as you will see in a few minutes when we will see the very picture of your speech and of my comments that has been transmitted. It's one of the best means of communication that has been developed. And I can only say that if this competition, which you have just described so effectively, in which you plan to outstrip us, and particularly in the production of consumer goods. If this competition is to do the best for both of our peoples and for people everywhere, there must be a free exchange of ideas. There are some instances where you may be ahead of us. For example, in the development of the thrust of your rockets for the investigation of outer space. There may be some instances, for example, color television, where we're ahead of you. But in order for both of us to benefit, you see, you never concede anything. Wait till you see the picture.
I think it would be interesting for you to know that this program is now being recorded on Ampex's color tape, and it can be played back immediately, and you can't tell that it isn't a live program. And извините,
question about that.
Вы адвокат капитализма, я адвокат коммунизма. Вот давайте мы посоревнуемся.
Nixon was then able to walk Khrushchev over to the Ampex VRX 1000, where he pressed the rewind button, stopped it, and then played back the recorded debate. A copy of the tape was then given to Khrushchev, who had no way of playing it. To hugely condense what happened next, the Soviet government ordered scientists to develop their own videotape technology, eventually coming up with an internationally accepted standard. Once they had that, the government started watching foreign cinema at regular special screenings. The initial audience was KGB officials and high-up dignitaries of the party. By the 1960s, the State Committee of Cinematography, a central government body within the USSR, was holding these foreign movie cinema nights for the high society. They justified this watching of illegal, capitalist propaganda under the pretense of needing to know what the enemy was up to. The only way to confront and criticize it was to watch it. Of course, the problem was that these Western films needed translating into Russian. Due to the pretense around these underground screenings, taking the route of other countries at the time of subtitling or dubbing the films would mean establishing accepted support industries, thereby accepting Western entertainment. So, their solution was the Soviet voiceover. At this point, the voiceover artist's job title was State Translator, and they would do simultaneous interpretation, oftentimes watching the film for the first time themselves as they translated on the fly. Andrey Gavrilov was one of the most prominent translators, starting his role as a voiceover translator at these screenings. The voiceover at these film showings went from being a singular way of solving a unique challenge, accessible only to a small group of the Soviet elite, to a cultural phenomenon by the 1980s. In 1985, video rental shops were even opening around Russia. An American news article from the time that was reporting on 2 new video stores that were opening in Moscow stated, "The new stores not only signal that VCRs have caught on, but that they are viewed by the hard-headed authorities as a legitimate form of entertainment, one that can replace a more Soviet pastime, drinking vodka." Despite this development, there were still huge restrictions on what could legally be watched. The people of the USSR now had the technology, but limited access to media they could actually watch. This meant that by the end of the 80s, there was an unsurprisingly booming black market, with smugglers bringing in over 100,000 foreign film cassette tapes each year, which went hand in hand with an increased demand for the likes of Gavrilov's talents. The same people who had been state translators picked up work as voiceover translators for these illegal foreign films, pre-recording their translations. Gavrilov explained, "Usually it happened at someone's apartment. At the beginning, as far as I can remember, everything was recorded on a reel-to-reel audio tape recorder, and then some craftsmen superimposed that audio track, the actual sound of translation, on the VHS tape. We could translate directly on the cassette, but it was too dangerous, because when you made a mistake or sneezed, then it would be too late to fix something." As well as Gavrilov, there were other voiceover translators of note from these early days in Russia, such as Alexei Mikhailov and Leonid Volodarsky. The voices of these translators became well recognized since there were so few of them. Gavrilov's voice was particularly associated with action films, and Volodarsky was particularly noted for the nasal quality of his voice. With regard to his vocal notoriety, he said, "I'm not interested in my voice at all. Back in time, I was a film translator, and so now I'm recognized primarily by voice, constantly asked about a clothespin on my nose. I don't like it. I'm not an opera singer, and my voice is not in the slightest bit related to my individuality. They say it's a kind of history. Well, okay, but I live at present." The concept of the Soviet voiceover was, and still is, the popular answer to translation in several other countries that were Soviet satellite states, most notably countries such as Bulgaria and Poland. In Poland, it is called Lektor. Like Gavrilov Translation, the Lektor is a single, neutral voice that translates every character while the original audio version plays quietly behind. One of the main reasons Lektor is still used is that it is very cost and time effective, saving producers on both of those fronts. It is also considered a deeply entrenched part of Polish culture now. Not that everybody likes it. For example, Polish journalist Maria Mninska had this to say on the Lektor. "This country was kept isolated from the West for 45 years, and many people want access to Western culture and languages. But with these voices, it is impossible. It's maddening. It's not entertainment, it's torture. They have no intonations, they have no feeling in their voices. Voice is a part of acting, and you completely lose this part of any show you watch." Conversely though, there is also a lot of love for Lektor too, as Netflix discovered the hard way. Netflix translates all of its original content into more than 20 languages through subtitling and dubbing. However, after hearing strong opposition from some people to the Polish dubbing, they conducted further research in Poland. Ultimately, Netflix ended up making Lektor the default audio for foreign language films and TV shows in Poland. The history of the Soviet voiceover is a curious tale of culture and politics, of discovery and adaptation, of progress and familiarity. Understanding the when, the what, and the why of this voiceover translation technique goes far beyond the topic of entertainment and gives an incredible insight into cultural identities. And it reminds us that the impact of voiceover is further reaching than you might originally think. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Voice Over Histories. If you liked it, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps with the reach, and I'm very grateful for any support. Next week's episode is going to be another Behind the Mic episode, this time with an absolute animation icon, June Foray. So until then, bye-bye.